Welcome to the Perfect Place to Put a Practice podcast. I'm your host, Mike Green from Dr. Demographics, where we help private practice owners and potential practice owners find the perfect place to grow and place their practice and market their practice and to stay on top of it. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to spot 5 signs that your area or city is changing demographically. And here's the big takeaway. If you're in a fast-changing area, a fast-growing area, it's really critical that you stay on top of your demographic data at least every 2 years to stay ahead of any changes. Your marketing is going to change. Your approach is going to change. That's what we're going over today in the Perfect Place to Put a Practice podcast. Let me set the stage here for you. Demographics are the foundation of your practice. They tell you who your patients are, what they need, and how they're changing over time. If you choose a location based on a demographic study from 5 years ago or so, that's a great start. But the truth is, populations shift, economies evolve, neighborhoods transform. Really relying on outdated data like you're going to find just on the internet or whatever is just a little risky. Now, what we see often is practices that have been in operation for quite some time, and they created a strategy that worked really well for them 5-10 years ago. And the problem that we're seeing is that they're just on a slow death march to outdated patient acquisition practices because they have not kept up with the demographic changes. For example, a city that was really perfect for, let's say, a pediatric dentist because it had young families might now be attracting retirees or single professionals. If you don't adapt your marketing or services, you're going to be leaving money on the table in really rapid changing areas that we see all over the country. I really recommend that you you look at your demographic data every 2 years. And it's not just about keeping up, it's about staying competitive and knowing what's relevant and who your real target is. So how do you know if your area is changing demographically? Today, I want to go over 5 key signs that you can watch for to know, or to kind of just perk your ears up, that things are maybe changing a little bit, maybe from underneath your feet and you don't even recognize it. So sign number 1 is that there's shifts in the housing development. First, housing is a very major indicator. Obviously, in our reports, we go in housing quite a bit, and we talk about that because it really tells a story of what's happening in the area. New construction or changes in housing types scream demographic change. Are single-family homes being torn down and high-rise apartments or luxury condos or big planned unit developments being put in their place? That's a cue that younger professionals or singles or even empty nesters are moving in. Conversely, you can see sprawling subdivisions with large houses. Families and kids are probably the target in those areas. For example, for a veterinarian, more families could mean a surge in pet ownership. Think dogs and cats in those big backyards. For optometrists, it might mean that more kids are needing vision screenings. For school, summer's busy. I saw a suburb right outside of Dallas recently that had a wave of new townhouses, and it was attracting young couples, and it shifted the median age from 42 to 35, which is pretty crazy, and that happened within 3 years. Now, that may not seem like a massive change to you, but as a demographer, that is a huge change of how I'm going to position my practice marketing in targeting that particular age group. So what do? So you drive around your area monthly would be one thing to do. Look for sale signs, construction cranes, zoning changes. You want to really watch your city planning, be aware of what's happening in your city, what kind of projects are being approved, what kind of projects are being proposed in that area. When you spot a trend, you want to update your demographic data as it confirms what you're seeing visually. There might be a huge piece of ground that's been that way for 15, 20 years that finally some dirt is moving on that land. chances are there's going to be some big demographic changes coming your way. And so you want to keep up on what's happening there, which again could change age, could change median income, median household size, all these different things, which may drastically change the way that you promote and attract patients to your practice. Sign number 2 is changes in local businesses. Next thing you want to watch is just the businesses around you. Are family-owned restaurants and hardware stores being replaced by, fancy coffee shops or boutiques, gyms, or co-working type spaces? That's a classic sign of gentrification, often bringing younger, higher income residents to the area. On the other hand, if you're seeing more dollar stores, pawn shops, vacant storefronts, it's probably pointing to some economic decline or some aging population with likely less disposable income. This matters for your practice because a wealthy, younger crowd might mean more demand for cosmetic services, cosmetic dentistry like teeth whitening or Invisalign, but more aging, lower income population might mean more work on restorative work like dentures or whatnot. In a mid-sized city, we studied the arrival of Whole Foods and a yoga studio correlated with a 15% increase in the median household income over 2 years, which again, from a demographer standpoint, is a significant increase. That's a huge signal that you need to shift your services or branding that you're putting out to your local community. So what to do is to get proactive. Join the Chamber of Commerce, check business license records, all those things. Make sure you know what businesses are being created or started within your local drive time, which we typically say for most of you is about 5 minutes from your practice location. Know what's going on business-wise in that area so that you can respond in a strategic way to attract patients in that area. Okay, sign number 3, school enrollment trends. Look at schools because they're an absolute goldmine for demographic clues. Changes in enrollment can reflect some family dynamics that may be changing in your area. A decrease in enrollment, for example, might mean that there's fewer young families or maybe an aging population is moving out. New schools or expansion signal growth in a family-oriented household. We see this often when you take older developments and bulldoze them and build a lot of townhouses and whatnot. That's bringing young families in typically, or sometimes empty nesters, depending on who they're targeting. This is a critical thing for practices, especially anyone that has kids as part of their patient base. Pediatric dentistry, obviously, optometry, orthodontist, where kids are really your core market. In Colorado, there was a town that we analyzed that had a 10% drop in elementary school enrollment over 3 years, and it matched the rise in residents over 65 years old. And some of those practices that have been there for generations in some cases, they just had to change their service offerings and change who they were targeting to stay competitive and successful. And several of the practice owners that I know of personally that did not make that change very well, they're suffering, to be frank. They didn't respond quick enough, and they're watching their patient base and their market slip away. You've got to watch and stay on top of those things. Contact your local school district, the school board. Make sure that you know what's happening. Most of that information, especially enrollment, is typically published online. Just keep an eye on it. Again, something you've got to look at. I usually say every 2 years, you've got to see what those numbers are so you can keep a track of the trends, so you can build that in to your strategic discussions that you're having with your team. All right, sign number 4, traffic and infrastructure changes. So when you're looking at new roads, public transit expansions, even when they make bike lanes or things like that, those are typically big indicators of a pretty large demographic shift. A new light rail might mean that they're attracting young commuters who don't own cars, while maybe when they widen a highway, that could draw families in to suburban developments. These changes really impact how your patients are going to reach your practice and who's moving into the area. A veterinary clinic, for example, near a bus terminal might see more urban pet owners with small dogs and cats, whereas a Florida city, a matter of fact, one that we actually worked in, they had a new toll road that led to a 12% increase in suburban households with children over 18 months. That's a huge shot in the arm for pediatric focused practice. And the ones that were on top of those changes happening and were prepared with that new service offering really were there to capitalize on those changes that frankly you have nothing to do with. You have no control over, but what you can control is your strategy and your targeting. So stay informed, check the city planning websites, attend the town meetings every now and again, subscribe to local news. Again, the Chamber of Commerce often is a really good resource to tell you what's happening there. If that is changing, if the accessibility and how they're going to get to your practice, new roads, bike lanes, that kind of thing, if you stay on top of that, you can stay in a strategic place to capitalize on that change to increase the patient base for your practice, or maybe just protect the patient base that you currently have. Okay, the last sign is cultural and community events. So pay attention to these. Are there new festivals, new farmers markets, or maybe a cultural celebration that you've not seen in the past? These reflect the values, diversity, and prioritization of the population that lives in your area. You may see a rise in family-friendly events, carnivals, library programs. If that didn't exist and it does now, chances are you've got more kids in the area. If you've got art walks or music festivals or pride events, that might point to more younger, creative, diverse residents that are moving in. 20 years ago, we saw this in Austin, Texas. This had a huge demographic shift. It's still going through a huge demographic shift, actually the other direction in some areas. But those practices that are on top of those shifts are the ones that can capitalize. This is a chance really for you to connect with your community and patients. Sponsor a booth at the festival. Whether you feel one way politically about it or not, or it's not interesting to you. Again, remember, we're marketers. We're agnostic to all these things. And so go get a booth at the festival. Offer a free vision screening if you're an optometrist at the health fair. But it will tell you who is moving into this area. So, for example, in a California town, there was a new Latino cultural festival that reflected a 25% increase in this particular community of Hispanic residents over 2 years. What happened was we recommended to this doctor that he hire more bilingual staff and advertise in Spanish, and this was several years ago, and he has knocked it out of the park. So happy for him and that he responded to that change in his community. So how do you track this? So follow your city event calendar. Just be involved. Obviously, we always recommend that your staff comes from the community that you are treating. Obviously, it's a benefit of you or as the doctor are established in that community, if your kids go to the schools, that kind of thing, so that you can keep your finger on the pulse of those shifts in the demographics that are happening in your area. So again, it's so important to revisit your demographics at least every 2 years. Such a critical thing, especially in those fast changing areas. A lot of great diagnostic tools. Many of you listening to this have used our services in the past, maybe when you place the practice using a site viability report. We typically recommend that doctors get those every 2 years for their practice so that they can have a fresh view of what's happening. Again, especially if you're in a high growth area, you'll be amazed and shocked how much those numbers will change every 2 years. And if it's been longer than that, you'll be absolutely blown away by how much change there is. And then you can bring it to that strategic discussion where you can bring your team in, your marketers in, whatever, and say, okay, here's the new data. How are we going to reposition our practice to capitalize on what's changing demographically in housing, changes in business, school enrollment, traffic and infrastructure, and community events in that area. Those areas it might be scary to you that they're changing and you're holding on to the past, but I'm here to tell you that it's an opportunity, certainly one that you can respond to and you can be successful with. How do you do that? You visit us at drdemographically.com and order a site viability report would be a great place to start. If you want to just have a consultation with us, a telephone consultation is another great option that you can look at, and we can talk through those options of what's happening in your community and how you can appropriately respond to it. All right. Thank you so much for listening to the Perfect Place to Put a Practice podcast. Hopefully you liked this episode. If so, please give us a rating on Spotify or wherever it is that you listen to the podcast. Again, my name is Mike Green from Dr. Demographics, and we'll see you on the next episode.